The sky was a dull gray as I stood in the airport terminal, clutching the small suitcase in one hand and my daughter Sophie's tiny hand in the other. Lucas, my 10-year-old, was hopping from one foot to the next, his excitement bubbling over as he held the hand-painted banner that read, "We love you, Mom." For years, Clarissa, my wife of 12 years, had been the glue holding our family together. She had this natural warmth about her, this ability to make everyone around her feel seen and loved. She worked in event planning, a demanding, high-pressure job that took her away from home more often than I liked. But I admired her passion for it. She was brilliant at what she did, and I took pride in her success. Last month, she told me about a major conference in Chicago. She said it was a career-defining opportunity, her chance to pitch a revolutionary event strategy to a global client. I'd seen the stress in her eyes and the weight of her responsibilities on her shoulders. I wanted to support her in any way I could, even if it meant handling the chaos of parenting solo for a week. But then, as the days passed, I started feeling this tug in my chest, a strange sense of longing, a desire to remind her that while her career was important, her family was still her anchor. And that's when the idea struck me, a surprise trip. Lucas and Sophie loved the idea immediately. "Mom's going to be so happy," Sophie chirped, her little face lighting up with excitement. I made all the arrangements in secret. Flights, hotel, everything. It wasn't easy keeping the kids quiet. They were practically bursting to tell her. But somehow, we managed. All I could think about was the look on Clarissa's face when she opened her hotel room door to find us standing there. I imagined the tears in her eyes, the joy of the unexpected reunion, the warmth of her arms around us. The plane ride was smooth, though Sophie's endless questions and Lucas's fidgeting kept me distracted. As we touched down in Chicago, my heart was pounding in anticipation. The kids could barely contain their excitement as we hailed a cab to the hotel Clarissa had mentioned in her texts. The lobby was bustling when we arrived, business people rushing past, the hum of conversations filling the air. I approached the front desk with a grin, ready to ask for Clarissa's room number. But as I spoke to the receptionist, something shifted. She looked at her screen, frowned slightly, and said, "I'm sorry, but we don't have anyone by that name registered here." I blinked, momentarily confused. There must be some mistake. "She's staying here for the conference," I insisted. The receptionist shook her head apologetically. "I've checked twice. There's no one under that name." A wave of unease rippled through me, but I quickly pushed it aside. Maybe she used her company's name for the booking. I thanked the receptionist and stepped aside, pulling out my phone to call Clarissa. It rang once, twice, then went straight to voicemail. Odd. Clarissa was usually quick to answer, especially when she was traveling. I tried again, and again it went to voicemail. "Is Mom coming soon?" Sophie asked, tugging on my sleeve. Her innocent question hit me like a punch to the gut. "I'm sure she's just busy," I replied, forcing a smile. "Let's grab some dinner while we wait." We found a small diner nearby, and I tried to focus on the kids as they devoured their food. But my mind was racing. Where was she? Why wasn't she answering? I replayed our last conversation in my head. She'd been cheerful, excited even, telling me about the meeting she was preparing for. Nothing had seemed off. After dinner, I tried calling her again. This time, the phone didn't even ring. It went straight to voicemail. Anxiety crept in, tightening its grip around my chest. I didn't want to alarm the kids, so I kept up the facade of calm, telling them we'd surprise her the next morning instead. Back at the hotel, I lay awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling. A sinking feeling settled in my stomach, one I couldn't shake no matter how much I tried to rationalize it. Something wasn't right. And as much as I wanted to believe that everything was fine, that we'd laugh about this mix-up later, a quiet voice in the back of my mind whispered otherwise. Little did I know, the truth waiting for me the next day would be nothing like what I had imagined. The next morning, I woke up with a heaviness in my chest that I couldn't shake. The kids were still fast asleep, their little faces peaceful and unaware of the storm brewing inside me. I told myself I was overthinking. Clarissa was probably just swamped with work. That's all it was. I had to believe that. I got the kids ready and made it a point to keep the energy light. We grabbed breakfast at the hotel, and Lucas and Sophie took turns guessing how Mom would react when she saw us. Their excitement was infectious, and for a moment, I let myself believe everything would be okay. After breakfast, I tried calling Clarissa again. Voicemail. My heart sank further. With no other option, I called her assistant, Jenna. Jenna was a sweet girl who always spoke fondly of Clarissa, and I figured she might know something. Hi, Jenna. It's Raymond. I started, trying to keep my voice steady. I was just wondering if Clarissa mentioned what time her meeting was today. I've been trying to reach her. There was a pause on the other end. Oh, hi, Raymond. I think she said it was later this afternoon. Is everything okay? Yeah, everything's fine, I lied. Thanks, Jenna. Appreciate it. I hung up and sighed. This was getting stranger by the minute. If she had a meeting later, why wasn't she answering? Where was she? Finally, I decided we'd go to the conference center she'd mentioned. It was only a short cab ride away, and I figured we could at least wait for her there. The kids were thrilled at the idea of the adventure, and their enthusiasm kept me grounded. When we arrived, the building was bustling with activity. Business professionals in suits, banners hanging from the walls, and the low hum of conversations. It felt like the kind of place Clarissa would thrive. I asked one of the staff members about the event and casually inquired if they could direct me to the marketing team section. Sure, the man said with a polite smile, pointing toward a cluster of meeting rooms. They're on the second floor. The kids and I made our way upstairs. My heart was pounding now, a strange mix of anticipation and dread. As we reached the corridor, I scanned the doors, looking for any sign of Clarissa. And then, I saw her name on a sign outside one of the rooms, Strategic Marketing Presentation, Clarissa Jensen. Relief washed over me. Finally, some confirmation she was here. But as I approached the room, something stopped me. A voice, her voice, was coming from the other side of the door. At first, I smiled, thinking how excited she'd be to see us. But then, I heard something else. Laughter. A man's laughter. My stomach twisted. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe she was practicing her presentation with a colleague. That's normal, right? I hesitated, my hand hovering over the door handle, before deciding against barging in. Instead, I leaned in closer, trying to hear more clearly. Last night was amazing, the man said, his voice low but unmistakably amused. You've got to stop distracting me like that. Clarissa's laugh followed. You're the one who keeps tempting me. We need to focus, or someone's going to catch on. I froze. My blood turned cold as the words sank in. Last night? Tempting? Catch on? It felt like the floor had been pulled out from under me. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. This wasn't possible. This couldn't be happening. Lucas tugged on my sleeve. Is Mom in there? He asked innocently. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to nod. Yeah, buddy. She's in there. I couldn't let him, or Sophie, hear anymore. Let's go back downstairs, I said, my voice strained but calm. Mom's busy right now, but we'll see her soon. The kids didn't question me, thankfully, and we headed back to the lobby. I felt like I was on autopilot, my mind replaying those words over and over. I couldn't shake the sound of her laughter, the way she'd spoken so casually to someone else. Someone who wasn't me. By the time we got back to the hotel, I was a wreck inside. I told the kids to play in the room while I stepped out to make a call. I needed answers. I needed to know what the hell was going on. I called her again, straight to voicemail. This time, I left a message. Clarissa, it's me. I'm in Chicago, with the kids. Call me back as soon as you get this. An hour passed. Then 2. No response. I felt like I was losing my mind. My thoughts were a whirlwind of doubt, anger, sadness, and confusion. How long had this been going on? Who was that man? Was I just some idiot, completely blind to what had been happening right in front of me? That night, as the kids slept, I sat in the dark, staring at my phone, waiting for a call that never came. Deep down, I already knew the truth. I just didn't want to admit it to myself yet. Not until I had undeniable proof. Tomorrow, I decided, I'd find her. I'd look her in the eye and demand the answers I deserved. Whatever was happening, I needed to know. For my sake. For the kids' sake. For the sake of the life I thought we were building together. Little did I know, the truth would be far worse than anything I could have imagined. The next morning, I woke up feeling hollow. The kids were up early, bright-eyed, and full of excitement for what they thought was a surprise visit to their mom. Lucas was busy packing his banner neatly in his bag, and Sophie was asking if we could buy flowers for Clarissa. I felt like I was suffocating under the weight of their innocence. How could I shield them from what I was starting to suspect? I forced myself to smile, to keep things normal, even though I felt anything but. "Let's get breakfast first," I told them. "Then we'll figure out where Mom is." We went to a diner near the hotel, and while the kids were busy devouring pancakes, I tried calling her again. Voicemail. Again. My heart sank further. This wasn't like her. Clarissa was usually glued to her phone. The only reason she wouldn't answer was if she didn't want to talk to me. By the time we finished eating, I couldn't sit still anymore. "Let's go to Mom's hotel," I told the kids. "She'll be so excited to see us." The lie tasted bitter in my mouth, but I had to keep them hopeful. I had to hold it together for their sake. We arrived at the conference center again, but this time, I didn't take the kids upstairs with me. "Wait here in the lobby," I said. "I'll go find Mom and bring her down to surprise you." Lucas nodded eagerly, and Sophie gave me a thumbs up. I smiled at them, but inside, I was shaking. Every step I took toward that meeting room felt heavier than the last. My chest tightened, and I had to remind myself to breathe. When I reached the room, I saw the door slightly ajar. Voices drifted out into the hallway, hers and his. I recognized his voice now, the same one I'd heard the day before. My stomach twisted into knots. This time, I wasn't going to walk away. I had to know. I pushed the door open just enough to peek inside. Clarissa was sitting on the edge of a table, laughing at something the man said. He was leaning against the wall, his arms crossed, a smug grin on his face. They were close, too close. It wasn't just their proximity. It was the way they looked at each other, the way her hand briefly touched his arm. It wasn't professional. It was intimate. I wanted to burst in, to confront her right then and there, but I stopped myself. My kids were downstairs. I couldn't risk making a scene, not when they were so close. Instead, I took out my phone and snapped a photo. My hands were shaking so badly that I almost dropped it, but I managed to capture the moment. Proof. I needed proof. As I stood there, frozen in disbelief, Clarissa's phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it, her smile faltering for just a second before she picked it up. I knew it was my message she'd seen because her expression changed. Guilt flashed across her face, and she quickly put the phone back down. The man noticed and raised an eyebrow. "Something wrong?" he asked. She shook her head, forcing a smile. "No, it's nothing. Just work stuff." I backed away before she could glance toward the door. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. I made my way back to the lobby, forcing myself to act normal in front of the kids. "Mom's still in her meeting," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We'll see her later." Lucas groaned in disappointment, but Sophie, ever the optimist, chirped, "She's going to love our surprise, Daddy. I just know it." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Yeah, sweetheart. She will." Back at the hotel, I couldn't stop staring at the photo on my phone. It wasn't incriminating in the way I'd expected. It was subtle, a quiet moment between two people who shouldn't have been that close. But to me, it was enough. It confirmed everything I didn't want to believe. I spent the rest of the day trying to distract the kids, taking them to a nearby park and letting them play while I sat on a bench, lost in thought. I kept replaying the last few months in my head, looking for signs I might have missed. The late-night work calls, the extra trips she didn't usually take, the way she'd seemed distant at times. It all added up now, but I hated myself for not seeing it sooner. That evening, after putting the kids to bed, I decided I couldn't keep this to myself anymore. I needed clarity. I needed her to look me in the eye and tell me what was really going on. I called her again, and this time, to my surprise, she picked up. "Hey," she said, her voice strained. "Sorry, I've been so busy. The conference has been nonstop." "Clarissa," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm in Chicago, with the kids." There was silence on the other end, deafening silence. You're here, she finally said, her tone wavering. Yes, we wanted to surprise you, but you weren't at the hotel. You weren't where you said you'd be. Her breath hitched. Ray, Don't, I interrupted, my voice breaking. Don't lie to me, Clarissa. Just tell me the truth. I'll come to you, she stammered. Let's talk in person. Please. Fine, I said. We're at the Grandview Hotel, room 412. She promised she'd be there in an hour, but as I hung up, I felt no relief, only dread. Whatever she was going to say, I knew it would change everything. I sat by the window, staring out at the city lights, waiting for her to walk through the door. Every passing minute felt like an eternity. The kids were sound asleep, blissfully unaware of the storm that was about to hit. And when she finally arrived, her face pale and her eyes filled with something I couldn't quite place. Fear, guilt, or maybe both. I knew my life was about to unravel in ways I never could have imagined. Clarissa walked into the room like a ghost of the woman I thought I knew. Her usual confidence was gone, replaced by hesitation. She closed the door quietly behind her and stood there, clutching her bag like it was the only thing grounding her. Ray, she started, her voice barely above a whisper. I can explain. I didn't respond immediately. I just sat there, staring at her, trying to keep my emotions in check. Explain what, Clarissa? I finally said. Explain why you weren't where you said you'd be? Or explain why you're spending time with another man. Her eyes widened, and she opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. I could see the wheels turning in her head, trying to come up with something that wouldn't dig her deeper into the hole she was already in. I wasn't hiding anything, she said, her voice trembling. He's just a colleague, Ray. We were working on the presentation together. I shook my head, letting out a bitter laugh. Working? Is that what you call it? Because what I saw didn't look like work to me. Her face flushed, and she looked down, unable to meet my gaze. I didn't mean for it to look like that, she murmured. I should have told you he'd be helping me, but I didn't think it mattered. Didn't think it mattered? My voice rose, but I quickly lowered it, glancing at the kids sleeping in the other room. Clarissa, do you have any idea how this looks? Do you even care how it makes me feel? She finally looked up, her eyes brimming with tears. Of course I care. Ray, I love you. I love our family. This wasn't supposed to happen. And there it was. The crack in her armor. The words she hadn't meant to say but couldn't take back. I felt my chest tighten as the weight of her admission hit me. Wasn't supposed to happen, I repeated, my voice hollow. So, it did happen. She didn't answer, but the silence said everything. I stared at her, the woman I had loved and trusted for over a decade, and I felt something inside me break. I can't do this right now, I said, standing up. The kids are asleep. We'll talk in the morning. Ray, please, she pleaded, stepping closer. Let me explain. Not tonight, I cut her off. I need time to think. You should go. Her face crumpled, but she nodded, grabbing her bag and walking to the door. She turned back to look at me, her lips trembling as if she wanted to say something, but she didn't. She just left, closing the door softly behind her. I stood there for a long time, staring at the door, trying to process what had just happened. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't stop the flood of thoughts and emotions racing through my mind. The woman I thought I knew, the life I thought we had. It all felt like a lie, and I had no idea what to do next. The sun crept through the curtains far too soon, dragging me out of a restless, fractured sleep. I had spent most of the night sitting in the armchair by the window, my thoughts a chaotic swirl of anger, sadness, and disbelief. The kids stirred in their beds, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing in their family. I forced myself to focus on them. Lucas was already awake, fiddling with his banner, while Sophie rubbed her sleepy eyes. Is Mom coming for breakfast? She asked, her little voice cutting through me like a knife. She had to take care of something, I said, keeping my voice as neutral as possible. But we'll see her later. Sophie pouted but nodded, and Lucas just shrugged, more concerned about making sure the letters on his banner were straight. Their innocence grounded me, if only for a moment. Whatever was happening between Clarissa and me, I had to protect them from it. They didn't deserve to carry this weight. After breakfast, I checked my phone. No calls, no messages from her. The silence was deafening. I knew I couldn't avoid the confrontation forever, but I needed clarity first. I needed to understand what had really happened. I made the kids promise to stay in the room and play quietly while I went to talk to the hotel staff about something. They didn't question me, happily diving into their toys and cartoons. Once I was sure they were settled, I left. I found Clarissa waiting in the lobby, sitting in a corner with her coffee untouched in front of her. She looked like she hadn't slept, her usual polished appearance replaced by disheveled hair and tired eyes. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "Let's talk," I said flatly, gesturing to a quieter area of the hotel. She followed me silently, her shoulders slumped. We sat down at a small table, and I wasted no time. "I need the truth, Clarissa. All of it. No more excuses, no more lies." She took a shaky breath, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Ray, I never meant to hurt you. I swear. It wasn't supposed to get this far." I leaned back, crossing my arms. What wasn't supposed to get this far? Her eyes darted away from mine, and for a moment, I thought she wasn't going to answer. But then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "Mark and I, we got close. Too close." Mark, the man I'd seen with her. The man whose voice still echoed in my mind. My jaw clenched, but I forced myself to stay calm. "How close?" She looked down at her hands, tears slipping down her cheeks. "It started with late nights working on the project. We talked, and it just happened. But it didn't mean anything, Ray. I swear. It didn't mean anything?" I repeated, my voice rising slightly despite my efforts. "Clarissa, you're telling me you threw away everything we built for something that didn't mean anything?" "I didn't throw it away," she snapped, her voice breaking. "I love you. I love our family. This was a mistake, a horrible mistake." I shook my head, the anger bubbling just beneath the surface. "A mistake is forgetting your keys, Clarissa. This was a choice, a deliberate choice." She didn't respond, just sat there crying quietly. For a moment, I didn't know what to feel. Anger? Betrayal? Sadness? It was all there, swirling together in a mess I couldn't untangle. "What happens now?" I asked finally, my voice quieter. "What do you expect me to do with this?" She looked up at me, her eyes desperate. "I want to fix this, Ray. I'll do whatever it takes. Therapy, counseling, anything. Please, just don't give up on us." I stared at her, my mind racing. Part of me wanted to believe her, to hope that we could somehow piece this shattered life back together. But another part of me, the part that had heard her laugh with him, that had seen the way she looked at him, wasn't so sure. "I don't know, Clarissa," I said finally, standing up. "I need time to think." She nodded, her face crumpling again. "Take all the time you need. Just, please don't shut me out completely." I didn't respond. I just turned and walked away, leaving her sitting there in the lobby. As I made my way back to the room, one thought kept running through my mind. How do you rebuild trust when the foundation has been destroyed? And more importantly, was I even willing to try? I spent the rest of the day going through the motions, pretending everything was fine for the kids. We walked around the city, visited a small park, and even stopped for ice cream. But my mind wasn't there. It was stuck in that hotel lobby, replaying every word Clarissa had said. It didn't mean anything. "We got too close. I love you. I love our family." The words felt hollow, like she was grasping for something to justify what she had done. But nothing could justify it. That night, after putting the kids to bed, I sat in the hotel room alone, staring at my phone. Clarissa hadn't called or texted since our conversation. Maybe she was giving me space, or maybe she didn't know what else to say. I wasn't sure which was worse. I didn't want to be that guy, the one who dug for more pain, who obsessed over every detail. But I couldn't help myself. My hands moved before I could stop them, typing her name into a search bar, scrolling through social media, checking her recent activity. Nothing unusual, nothing suspicious. But then I made a mistake. I clicked on his profile. Mark. His page wasn't private, and his most recent post was from the night before. A photo taken inside a dimly lit bar, a half-empty glass in front of him, the caption reading, "Late nights. Worth it." I stared at it, my chest tightening. It could have meant anything, but I knew what it meant. Without thinking, I sent Clarissa a text. "Me? Where were you last night?" Minutes passed. No response. I sent another. "Me? I need an honest answer." Still nothing. Then, finally, my phone buzzed. "Clarissa. Ray, please don't do this over text. Let's talk tomorrow." Tomorrow. Like I could just put this away for the night and sleep peacefully. I clenched my jaw, debating whether to push further, but I knew I wouldn't get the truth through a screen. If she wanted to talk, we'd talk. On my terms. The next morning, I made arrangements to take the kids out with me. I didn't want them in the room when I confronted her again. We grabbed breakfast, and I took them to a museum nearby. I tried to focus on their laughter, on the way their eyes lit up at the dinosaur exhibits, but the weight in my chest never lifted. At noon, I told them we were going back to the hotel. I had already texted Clarissa, telling her to meet me in the lobby at 1 o'clock. She was already waiting when I arrived. This time, she looked put together, her hair neatly tied back, her clothes carefully chosen. But her eyes told a different story, red-rimmed, exhausted. I wasted no time. "Tell me where you were last night," she sighed, rubbing her temples. "Ray, just answer the question." She looked around nervously, as if the walls were closing in. "I was at dinner with a few people from the conference. Mark included?" She hesitated. "Yes." I nodded slowly, my fists clenching at my sides. "So, you lied when you said you were at the hotel?" She swallowed hard. "I didn't lie. I didn't think it mattered." A humorless laugh escaped me. "Didn't think it mattered? You disappeared for hours, didn't answer my calls, and now I find out you were with him? And you don't think it matters?" She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "Ray, please. It's not what you think. Yes, we had dinner. Yes, we talked. But that's it. Nothing else happened." I shook my head. "You expect me to believe that?" Tears welled up in her eyes. "I don't know what else to say. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But I swear, I haven't." She stopped herself, biting her lip. I caught it instantly. "Haven't what, Clarissa?" She looked away. My stomach twisted. "You haven't slept with him?" I asked. She shook her head quickly. "No, I haven't." For the first time since this started, I didn't believe her. Not because I wanted to assume the worst, but because I felt it. There was something she wasn't saying. I exhaled sharply, my mind racing. "So, what now? You expect me to just move on like this never happened?" She hesitated before whispering, "I don't know." That was the breaking point. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. "Then I don't know either, Clarissa." I turned and walked away, leaving her sitting there, just like she had left me in that conference center 2 days ago. I walked out of that lobby feeling both lighter and heavier at the same time. Lighter because I'd finally said what had been burning inside me for days. Heavier because I knew, deep down, this wasn't the end of it. The kids were waiting for me upstairs, sitting cross-legged on the bed, watching cartoons like nothing in the world had changed. But for me, everything had. Lucas turned his head. "Did you see Mom?" I forced a smile. "Yeah, bud. She's finishing up her work." Sophie bounced toward me. "When are we gonna surprise her?" I swallowed hard. "Soon." They didn't notice the crack in my voice. They didn't see the storm raging inside me. I envied them for that. A few hours passed before my phone vibrated. "Clarissa. Clarissa, can we talk in private? Please." I stared at the message for a long time before replying. "Me, fine. Come to the hotel." Alone. She arrived within the hour, knocking softly at the door. I stepped outside, closing it behind me. She looked up at me with those familiar eyes, the ones I had loved for over a decade. But now, all I saw was uncertainty, guilt. "I need to be honest with you," she said. "All of it." I didn't say anything. I just waited. She took a deep breath. "I didn't sleep with him, Ray, but I wanted to." It felt like the air had been sucked out of my lungs. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay still, to stay calm. She continued, voice shaking. I let it get too far. The flirting, the late nights, the secrets. I let it happen because I felt like something was missing. Like I wasn't. She stopped herself, wiping at her eyes. I finally spoke. Like you weren't what? She looked at me with so much sadness that, for a second, I almost forgot my anger. Like I wasn't seen, Ray. I let out a sharp laugh, bitter and exhausted. Not seen? Clarissa, I rearranged my entire life for you. I held everything together so you could chase your dreams. I stayed up late waiting for your calls, took care of our kids alone, and still, you didn't feel seen? She shook her head. I know. That's why I feel so disgusted with myself. I didn't appreciate what I had. I let my own insecurities ruin us. I looked away, staring down the empty hallway, my heart pounding. So, what now? She reached for my hand, but I didn't move. I want to fix this, Ray. I know I don't deserve another chance, but I'm begging you. I'll do anything. Counseling, quitting my job, whatever it takes. I just don't want to lose us. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in our marriage, I didn't know if I could ever see her the same way again. I took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. I need time, I said. She nodded, tears spilling over. I'll wait, however long it takes. But deep down, I wasn't sure time would be enough to fix what she had broken. The days that followed were some of the hardest of my life. I went through the motions, waking up, feeding the kids, keeping things normal, but inside, I felt like I was standing at a crossroads, unable to move. Clarissa called and texted every day, but I rarely responded. I wasn't trying to punish her. I just needed space. I needed to feel what life was like without the weight of her betrayal clouding my thoughts. And then, one morning, something shifted. I was sitting at the park with the kids, watching them chase each other around the playground. Sophie giggled as Lucas pretended to be a monster, roaring as he ran after her. And in that moment, I realized something. I still had something worth fighting for. My family. Not just the idea of it, but the real, messy, complicated, and imperfect love that bound us together. I wasn't sure if I could ever forget what Clarissa had done, but I knew one thing for certain. I didn't want my kids to grow up in a home full of resentment and regret. If there was even a chance that we could rebuild, I had to try. That night, after the kids were asleep, I picked up my phone and called her. She answered on the first ring. Ray? I took a deep breath. Let's talk. For real this time. She was silent for a moment, then whispered, okay. We met at a small cafe the next morning, away from everything and everyone. Clarissa looked exhausted, but there was something else in her eyes this time. Hope. I don't know how to fix this, she admitted, but I know I want to. I nodded. Me too. And that was the first step. We started therapy. We had hard conversations, some that hurt, some that healed. There were nights I still felt that sting of betrayal, but there were also moments when I remembered why I had fallen in love with her in the first place. She changed. I changed. We chose to fight for what we had. Months later, standing in our backyard watching the kids play, I looked over at her and saw something I hadn't seen in a long time. A woman who was willing to fight just as hard for our marriage as I was. It wasn't perfect. It would never be perfect, but it was ours. And this time, we weren't taking it for granted.